The views and opinions expressed on this program are not those of Norfolk State University or WNSB FM. Thank you for listening.
It's Hampton Roads Voices on Hot 91.
Defining myself as opposed to being defined by others is one of the most difficult challenges. Kara Mosley Braun, politician and lawyer. And this is particularly true in the African American community. Hi, everybody. I'm Benita Adams, and today on Hampton Roads Voices, in honor of Black History Month, we're going to talk about being Black in America, creating and defining the African American community. What is the state of the Black community? How can we strengthen our community? And is the Black community divided? We have some guest experts here in the studio, and we definitely want to hear from you. Next on Hampton Roads Voices on Hot 91.
It's Hampton Roads Voices on Hot 91.
If you're just joining us, welcome to Hampton Roads Voices. I'm Benita Adams. And today, in honor of Black History Month that just started, we're going to be talking about a series of topics all through the month of February. Today, we're going to talk about creating and defining the African American community, or being Black in America today. We'll look at aspects of the family, the church, politics, and culture. We definitely want to hear from you, so let me go ahead and give you that number. The number is 757-823-9110. 823-9110. We definitely want to hear from you. So we have our in-studio guests today. First of all, we have Dr. Carol Pretlow. She's an associate professor in the political science department at Norfolk State University. Dr. Pretlow, thank you for being here.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I always enjoy coming here.
I love when you come here. And Dr. Antipas Harris, Dean of Urban Renewal Center in Norfolk. Dr. Harris, thank you for being here.
Such a delight. Thanks for having me here today.
Yes. So let's just start. Dr. Pretlow, I'll start with you. Tell us a little bit about what it means to be a political scientist, perhaps I'll say it that way.
You know, that's a difficult question because I think I've been a political scientist ever since I was 4 years old.
Wow.
But it does mean that you not only look at the culture and the society itself, you look at the institutions that have an impact on changing that society.
Yeah.
And for that reason, you are looking at the government from the standpoint of state, local, and federal politics, and of course the legal system as well. So I think being a political scientist means that you have an interdisciplinary perspective.
Very nice.
Yeah.
And when you say those things, those are aspects, government and the things that you mentioned.
Yeah.
Those things affect our lives
Exactly.
every day, especially
Every day.
when we think about the partial government shutdown. Maybe we had not thought about the government, but let me tell you, those who are not paid really thought about it. So those entities, the systems really matter.
And strangely enough, I don't think it should have been as complicated as our president made it. Mm-hmm. Obviously, if you close the government down and it affects federal workers, it's going to have a spiraling effect, affect the economy, going to affect businesses.
Yes.
Once before when we closed down, I think it was 2016, it meant that some small businesses, restaurants, cleaners, some drugstores and communities had to close because they relied on the community of federal workers.
Oh, absolutely. It's a domino effect.
Yeah, it's a domino effect.
All right, so we'll get into a lot of that. And our next guest, of course, as I mentioned, Dr. Antipas Harris. Tell us what you do as the Dean of the Urban Renewal Center in Norfolk.
Thank you. The Urban Renewal Center aims to awaken society to its promised wholeness. You just talk about fractures in our society in so many ways, whether it's political, racial, whether it's religious or educational. But at the Urban Renewal Center, our vision is to see society awaken to a hope, a future, what could be. And so hope is we believe to be sort of the force behind what we do. And so one way, our DNA is race relations, so we are very cognizant and work very hard on how to bridge the ethnicities and races, as it were. And we do that by three directives. One, coalition building. Two, education. And three, social engagement. Mm-hmm. So it exists to build partnerships within the community. In Hampton Roads in particular, there are many problems, and there are equally as many solutions. Mm-hmm. Part of the challenge is connecting the problem with the solutions.
Right.
So we seek for ways to build partnerships and to bridge those gaps and to overcome challenges by the resources we have right here in our community.
I love that, and I love that you have a local emphasis.
We build locally and think globally. When we talk about race relations, right? You have to take a boatload of black people out to Utah to work on that problem. But in Norfolk, we don't have that problem, right?
Okay.
Right. We're almost 50-50 black white, right?
Yeah.
So if we're looking for a laboratory in the country to work on this race relations, this is a perfect opportunity. And what we do here is translatable to other communities. And also it's something to tell the world about, because many people learn about ethnicities based on what they see on television, right? It's like learning about Africa from television, from people who want to raise money to go in and help the African people. And then you show up in Africa and realize they're better off than you are.
It's like, wait a minute. Yes, absolutely. So that is so interesting. So you talked about communities. That's one of our emphasis today, that we're going to talk about creating and defining the African American community, or what does it mean to be black in America? So, Dr. Pretlow, I'm going to start with you. What, from your vantage point as a political scientist, what is the state of the black community?
Ooh, that's a difficult question.
That's a big one.
Because obviously, as I told you, I approach everything from an interdisciplinary perspective. But on I don't want to say down on the streets level, I'm feeling that I'm repeating things that happened back when I was a child. And that's strange. And I don't mean it's segregated, because we do have the ability to integrate. But some of the same problems that I saw in the small town that I grew up in, Smithfield, that are here again. That is schools being underfunded. And I think about 3 weeks ago, I was reading an article in the New York Times, and I was thinking, well, and it focused on Brown versus the Board of Education and what it meant in the New York school system. And I said, wait a minute, that's segregation. What are you talking about? And then I thought back to how our schools still, we don't call it segregated, but there is a division of school resources in smaller communities, in African American communities. And so you see the same problems practically repeating themselves. Also businesses, the minority businesses, and particularly housing. When I look at downtown Norfolk and see what has happened downtown, Norfolk downtown used to be most was African American community. Okay. And you didn't see the sharp divide between Church Street and that area and downtown Granby Street. Now, downtown and the waterfront is practically all European Americans.
Very
so
interesting.
some of the same problems.
Some of the same problems.
Yeah.
Dr. Harris, how do you see the African American community in terms of where we are now?
I think Dr. Pretlow said something very powerful when she said that it's difficult. I think it's difficult to respond because it's very complex. When I was thinking of this question, the first thing I thought about was that black community is not monolithic. And we have a somewhat common African American experience, but there is so much diversity within the black community that it has increasingly become more diverse. And there are assumptions that everybody black is just alike when we have an influx of, when it was easier to be an immigrant in America.
When it was
you
say that so kindly.
We have a very diverse community, and many even Hispanics or black Hispanics. And so it enriches the black community, and it brings a lot of richness in the sense that there's a lot to learn within the black community about the state of the black community. Culturally speaking. Now, that's one piece. The other piece that complicates things is what Dr. Pretlow said about when she was a child, some of the things that she experienced are repeating. I was speaking to someone who may be one of my editors, maybe around 70, and we were working on a race document, and she made the exact same comment. She said, we marched about a lot of this in the 1960s, Antipas. Tell me, why am I feel like I'm repeating stuff that I thought we had cured back in the 60s?
Right.
And I said to her, I said, because people my age and younger are doing the same stuff they did back in those days. And this is partly because some of it may be intentional, and others, it could be naivete. Because what happens is the personal attitudes from the 1960s on Jim Crow about black and white are not as predominant today. Dare I say, in some cases, the attitudes may be non-existent. People don't think, well, I like a black person, well, I like a white person. There are those who do, but hear me here. What happened is in the 60s that the disparities were institutionalized. They were inculcated in the structures.
Yes.
Even you talked about Black History Month. Black History Month has become a for us, by us celebration, when it really should be an American celebration, where many whites don't even understand why black people feel the way they do. And it's a shame in America. I was at a function not too long ago. A white lady was singing, lifted every voice and singing, made the comment afterwards and said, well, I don't know very much about the black community. And I said to myself, well, aren't you American? I know a lot about the white community. I'm like, no white person in America should be talking about, I don't know that much about the African American community, as in we live in a different country. It's like, we're all Americans. Everybody should know about the American experience. Exactly. So if I don't know, and I grew up in a home with one entirely different narrative of America than the one that someone else knows, then if I get position of leadership, I live into the narrative that I know, which has enshrined within itself attitudes over against the other. And it's always questioning why people are doing that when they could be doing this. It's because we have two different Americas.
Oh, yes.
And so that's how you get that repeated, because people sometimes see my best friend is black,
I get that a lot.
or my best friend is white, but the reality is, even going to church, we all in this multicultural church together, then you go home to completely different narratives. And when you go to those completely different narratives, you can't understand how, Taekwon and them over there are behaving and reacting and making the choices they're making, because you're judging them based on your narrative. And it's two different narratives.
Two different narratives.
And it should not be the case, because we're all Americans.
Amazing.
Well, it
Dr.
really
Ella.
shouldn't be. And yet, I find myself repeating inside the feeling that I felt as a child when I saw a police officer.
That's
Right.
exactly what I was
and
going
that
to
has
ask you.
happened. And I think I shared it with you. Even since I've been at Norfolk State, I have walked down the street at a time, and one of the situations that occurred, and I shared it with my students, I was at an ATM and my card jammed. And I was like, okay, I'll go in the bank and fix it, because it was right outside the bank. And a police officer came to me and said, lady, is there a problem? And I said, yeah, my card jammed. And instead of asking me, well, how, let me look into it, he said, well, it's a violation of the local law to do. And I said, but I'm not. He said, well, do you have any ID? And I was like, well, not really. I'm not doing anything to the machine. But fortunately, I walked into the bank, and there were two students who used to be here at Norfolk State, and they said, she's one of our, she always comes in here, and we'll look into it. But I felt really bad afterwards, the way he talked to me. So
feeling,
I walk
yes.
around with my ID around my neck every time I go on light rail, every time I go over.
But now, this was a Norfolk police officer?
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure the chief would be happy to know about that, because you shouldn't have to be dealing with
Well,
that.
now, that was actually right after 9/11.
Oh, okay, all right. I thought we talked.
But there
I
have
was
been,
just about to say.
the funny thing is, a couple of weeks ago, I was walking, got off light rail, and I saw the police officer, but I wasn't looking at his face. And he said, ma'am. And I said, oh, God, here we go. Ma'am, did you hear me speaking to you? And I still looked down. I said, no, sir, I didn't hear you. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to hear you. He said, look up. And I looked up, and it was one of my former students.
That is the difference. That's the difference. We're going to come back to those comments. I love what you're saying. So let me give you the number, 757-823-9110. We're talking about creating and defining our community, or what it's like being black in America. Family, church, politics, and culture on Hot 91.
Is Hampton Roads Voices on Hot 91.
Welcome back, everybody. I'm Benita Adams, and today on Hampton Roads Voices, we're talking about creating and defining the African American community, or what does it mean to be black in America? We have with us our in-studio guest experts, Dr. Carol Pretlow, Associate Professor here at NSU in the Political Science Department, and Dr. Antipas Harris, Dean of the Urban Renewal Center in Norfolk. So we were talking about earlier in terms of what the state of the black community is. And Dr. Harris, you said something. I wrote it down when you were talking a few minutes ago before the break. And you said that there is a different narrative from perhaps one race or culture to the next, and there are two Americas. Expound on that just a little bit.
Sure. Part of it is the education system. The narrative of American history is proof text in a way that romanticizes American history, and African Americans both we're a narrative people. We learn, we train kids, everything through narrative and stories. And my experience of the police, my negative experience of the police, was largely my grandfather's negative experience, and my dad's and my brothers and my whole community. So even now, when I have seen over the last few years some of the challenges factions between police and community, when I saw it, some of the videos, my visceral reaction was because of the narratives that shaped me. And those narratives are not included in the African, in the American narrative or the education system. Those experiences and stories that have been passed down that the white community would not even know about. They wouldn't know why. We know about the police, but we don't know why the whole police system was created in the first place. Right? African Americans may not know the details of it, but we know what it was like for our grandfather and our fathers, and was shaped by that. And it was a way of training kids to make better choices and to survive in a society that just inherently we've never felt was really in support of us. We had to learn to navigate a society that was not really on our side. So everything is a defense, even here in Norfolk. There are kids now who there are certain parts of Norfolk, if you say, let's go over such and such, if I named them, you would be surprised. I know where they are. The kids will say, oh, no, black people don't go over there. I mean, how does a 9-year-old today know that? And the thing is, you think it's some isolated story your mom told you. No, because what he's reacting to is something that the entire black community knows about. That we don't talk about. Wow. But the white community would not even know about that. That's what I mean by two different narratives.
Well, you know, when you said that, it rang a bell with me that I didn't resolve it until about 2 weeks ago. And I was thinking back to a situation I think I shared with you. I was about 9 years old and walking down the street, and a white gentleman was in back of me, and he said, "You little nigger."
Recently?
No, when I was 9.
When you, okay.
I knew that was derogatory, and that my parents had said you had to treat elders with respect. And I didn't say anything. I just kept on walking. And he said, "Didn't you hear me?" And I said, "Oh, no, I thought you were talking to your mother." And
you lived through that?
Yeah. And my uncle, who had a barber shop right near, he grabbed me and said, "Carol, come in here right now." And I was like, I didn't say your mama. I said your mother. It was really correct. And he said, no. So when my father came, he said, "Carol, you can't talk like that." Now, I didn't connect the dots until about 2 weeks ago, and I was reading Emmett Till. And that was around that same time, and that same kind of, not the exact thing, but you could get lynched for being derogatory. And I was telling my students, I said, but in a child's mind, I was clarifying and sanitizing the mama to your mother.
Right.
So why was that?
Right, but your father was training you
Yes.
for survival in a society that you could have got lynched in. Yeah. And so what happens is that gets passed down.
It does.
Yeah.
From generation to generation. It's like the ham that's cut off on the both ends.
Right.
And the fourth generation, they're still cutting off the ham on both ends. And people say, why? And you think, because my mom did it, because my grandma did it.
My grandma.
It's like, I don't really know why, right? And that's the same thing about why don't you go to that side of town to the 9-year-old? It's not his own experience, but it's as if it's own experience because mama said that's not what we're supposed to do. Black people don't go. So you live into this could be false narrative, but it's rooted in historical truth. And you live into that and you grow into the feeling that you are in a place where you don't fully belong.
Exactly.
A place where you
And the white community in general.
Yes.
Now there are always exceptions, but for the most part, don't live in a world where they don't feel like they belong. So then I've been in classes. White people say all this stuff and I'm like, I'm thinking, they just speaking their mind. My dad told me, don't go up there talking your mind, boy. You
can say that?
And so I don't even know what I can say. So you sit there, and you live into this. I can't say what I'm really thinking, and then the worst case scenario is when you blurt out something with some kind of courage and then you actually get reprimanded for it. It only validates what you felt all along.
My daddy told me not to say it. Let me grab and give the numbers. 757-823-9110. We're talking about the African American community. And specifically right now, we're talking about the narrative, the stories that have been passed on to us from generation to generation that really does affect how we see the world, how we live. These two Americans that Dr. Harris is talking about. The number 757-823-9110. We want to hear your experiences. So again, give us a call. So how do we change the narrative then? If this is the same narrative or versions of it from grandma, great-grandma to grandma to Dr. Pretlow, how do we change the narrative for a new generation, or is it possible?
I'm not sure it's possible, and frankly, I'm not sure I want to change it.
Okay.
Because
talk about that.
Now, I don't want my students and my relatives to repeat the same mistakes or to do the same things, but I think the narrative is part of who I am. And so I want to remember the things that happened in the past. Now, not all of them were bad. Some of them were very good. We look at, for example, segregated schools, and I'm not applauding that. But what I do applaud is that it was a time in which every single teacher I had, and I can name them, but contributed something, and most of them were underpaid, but they gave me this thirst for knowledge, this desire to be better, and that part of the narrative I want to keep. And even part of the narrative, I have students who are working in restaurants and all, and some of them have said to me, Professor, this isn't permanent. And I said, honey, you do what you do. My dad had a college degree and ended up, unfortunately, he couldn't find a job. He had been a principal of a school in another area, came back to this area, couldn't find a job, waited tables in Williamsburg. And I never felt embarrassed. I felt, wow, he's doing what he has to do. Now, ultimately, he directed the poverty program in our county. But still, I have students who think being a waitress or a waiter is embarrassing. No, it is not. You do what you have to do
and
with
that
class.
is a part of the culture and the narrative and the story. We could all three of us sit here and tell the stories. My mother was a domestic worker. And that wasn't that many. It was only one generation removed from me.
Right.
Her mother was a domestic worker in the South. And so we have those narratives.
And we should be proud. Look at what we have accomplished.
Right.
If my dad had not been a waiter, maybe my reaction to people would be different. Maybe when I go in a store, and I have gone in several restaurants in Norfolk where they have this little tip jar and everybody divides the tip, and I said, okay, see me outside after work, because I'm not splitting this tip. You are the one that waited on me. You're getting it. So maybe if I hadn't seen that in action, maybe I would have a different perspective.
Absolutely. We have a caller on the line. Let's go live. Caller, you are live on the air. What is your name, please? And where are you calling from?
Hi.
Hi there. What is your name, please, if you choose to give it? And where are you calling from? You're live.
Johnny B.
Okay, Johnny B. And what is your question or comment, please?
My comment is, look, this is what I know about my family, man. The way we came here to America was through Ellis Island, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I'm Greek, I'm English, I have a few other things in me. But in ancient Greek, my last name means the Gray Wolf, man. My first name means God's grace, my middle means humble and noble, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right? My family came through Ellis Island. We had nothing to do with slavery and all that, right? In fact, my great-grandfather was in New York, man, city. He's in New York City, and, you know, he built up a Harley that was just like the police Harleys. And he was running hooch.
And so are you saying, Johnny, are you saying that...
I'm saying that color shouldn't make no difference, man. We're all people in a way, but we have black family, you know? Mm-hmm. And the thing was, my mom told me, was like, she was riding to their place or whatever, and my grandparents told her, do not say a word about the color of their skin. Mm-hmm. And my first best friend was a black kid from the city, and I lived in the country in upstate New York at the time, you know? And I was like, Sebastian, how come your skin don't come like mine? And he goes, that's just the color of my skin. And I was like, oh, cool. How come your hair don't wash flat like mine? Now that's how my hair grows. All right.
So you're saying we're all American. Johnny, thank you for your call. We do have one other caller. Caller, thank you so much, Johnny, for your call. And I understand the point that you're making. We have one other caller. Caller, you're live on the air. What is your name, please, and where are you calling from?
Yes, my name is Diana Christia, and I'm from Suffolk, Virginia. Well, actually, I grew up in Norfolk, but right now I reside in Suffolk.
Yes, absolutely. What is your question or comment, please?
Well, I have a question. I'm enjoying the segment that you're having on the Black experience, but my question is coming from a point of being a mom. I am 43 years old. Mm-hmm. I grew up here in Norfolk. I experienced some racism, but not too much. You know, I can cite a few experiences, but nothing traumatic. But my question is really for my daughter and the education that she's currently receiving. She's in private school. She's in a predominantly Caucasian private school, and I'm having some issues with really teaching her how to fit in but not forget about the Black experience.
Okay.
You understand what I mean?
So to fit in but still retain her history and culture.
Absolutely, without acclimating to their culture completely. Now, we go to church and everything, but day to day, I'm concerned about her her self-esteem, her value of not being around African-American children every day, being around predominantly Caucasian kids and their value system. So I was just wondering what your take was on that.
Thank you so much. That is very interesting. I'm going to throw that to our guest. Dr. Harris, I'll start with you. Thank you, Diane, for calling.
Thank you so much, Diane, for that question. Very important question. And I think it gets to the heart of what Dr. Pretlow was saying earlier when she said she doesn't want the narrative to change. I understood what she was saying. What she was saying is that in society as we have it in our landscape, in order to, when people talk about integrated societies, black and white relationships, relations, it's usually hijacked by a particular narrative. And it's black people have to give up something to be included. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's really important in general statement that white America is willing to understand and learn about black America. That's what you're saying. Because when you take your children to a school that's predominantly white and they learn, what happens is they become, their blackness become domesticated, if you would, or it becomes, nobody wants to identify with negativity. Mm-hmm. And blackness has been pathologized historically to be black is something negative. And, but to black is not something negative, right?
Carol, jump in on that.
I fight the same battle because I teach a course in modern political theory. Mm-hmm. And I have gone through textbooks. And the publisher of the book that I use, I wrote, and I said, look, you don't have any black philosophers in here. Now, what's the deal here? You can, since you're doing it by time frames, 1700s, 1800s, it's not a difficult thing to do. Next thing I know, they send me a textbook with one black person in it, and it's Martin Luther King, and it's just one page. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm sorry, but I have felt anger. And so I said, okay. And after 2 or 3 years of doing this repeatedly, I said, okay, ball's in my court. So now my students this month, each class, I said, okay, you decide on a black philosopher you want, then we will put it in the same time frame of the white philosopher, and we'll look at both accounts and both theories, and then we will move on. I have one Asian student, and I told him, you can do the same thing, because we are an integrated society means a variety of cultures and experiences, and I don't want to teach just a political theory that's only white America.
And part of the challenge is that either the folks who are making these textbooks don't know about the richness of black history, or in some cases I've seen where they actually edit black people out based on certain things that they have said in reaction to white domination. Right? Don't quote that person. Don't quote Louis Farrakhan. Well, I have to quote Thomas Jefferson. He didn't he endorsed slavery. So my thing is that black people, we had to learn about civil rights. Right? I mean, Civil War, right? And how they were fighting over whether we be slaves or not. And we have to learn the folks in the Confederacy, right? I learned about them.
Me too.
And then have to tolerate the statues all over our city. And, but when it comes to, I had to say that, right? But when it comes to, and somehow we can't get that statue out of Norfolk yet. But if I quote Louis Farrakhan or some folks who maybe have had some very harsh things about white America, then I would be marginalized from the conversation or told to edit that out for offending people. And black people, I blame black people for that. Because if the Jewish community is very sensitive, and we have to respect the Jewish community. The white community is very sensitive about folks who have said very harsh things against the white community. But black people just take everything. It's like, no, we should tell them, listen, I don't want to hear about what Thomas Jefferson said. He need to be taken out of the classroom then, because of the stuff he did. But I'm wrong for saying that, right? But see, that's what I mean.
Right.
That's what I mean.
Let's go ahead and take a break.
Yeah. We need a break right now.
And if I smoke, I'll have a cigarette.
When we come back, we'd like to hear from you. 757-823-9110. This is Hot 91.
Is Hampton Roads Voices. Hot 91.
Welcome back, everybody. I'm Benita Adams. Today we're talking about being black in America, in the family life, church life, political life, and culture. We have a caller on the line. We're going to go straight to the phone. Caller, what is your name, please? And where are you calling from?
Good evening. My name is JC, and I'm calling from Norfolk.
Okay, JC, what is your question or comment, please? You're live.
My question or comment is, so I just recently, well, first of all, I'd like to say thank you guys for having this show. I think it's important that people of color have the ability to hear this commentary. It's conversation starters, things like that. So just again, thank you.
You're welcome.
And my comment or question is, so the lady who just commented earlier, she discussed or presented a question regarding her child in a school that is predominantly white, and I'm that child, so to speak. I chose to go to a predominantly white high school just because of course at the time I didn't know, but I just wanted a better environment for myself for high school. So I took out the possibility of potentially ended up, or some of the things that I was thinking about was ending up being a young teenage mom and things like that. So I decided that it would be better to put myself in that environment to eliminate some of those distractions. So that was a choice of my own. But in doing so, I grew up in children who experience that, who are of color and go to a school that is predominantly white. What we experience is a conflict, and we're constantly straddling two different worlds. Because I grew up, when I would go home to my community and it'd be around predominantly black people, my friends would tell me, oh, I sounded white. And then when I would go back to school, with my white friends, those that were there who were of color, especially the boys of color, they would talk so terribly about black women that it made me, like one of the doctors on the show say, domesticate my blackness. And I constantly had to figure out what type of person I wanted to be depending on the environment that I'm in. So,
how did you find the balance, JC? How did you find the balance at that time?
How did I find the balance? That's a wonderful question. I don't think it really was about a balance for me. Mm-hmm. My mindset was about my advancement. Okay. And it wasn't that people of color couldn't advance me or being around them couldn't advance me. It was just I could see the resources that my people did not have. And I wanted to be around people who did have those resources. So it was more about my self-preservation and less about a balance.
Very interesting. Very interesting.
I can identify with
JC, thank you so much for that call. I'm going to throw this to Dr. Pretlow first. Thank you again for calling. Dr. Pretlow.
Absolutely.
JC, I can identify with that because way back in the day when I was in high school, I decided to go to Radford University. And at that time, Radford wasn't integrated. And it was all women. And there were just 3 African-American students. And people asked, why would you select that? And it was not, I loved Hampton. I go to Hampton in the summer and come here to Norfolk State in the summer. But I wanted to experience a different environment. And I wanted to understand what was so different about education. Because to me, at that time, education was education. Now, I did recognize that there were resources allocated for that institution that were not allocated for others. And through that institution, I come to William and Mary in the summer and do other things that maybe when I transferred to Fisk, we didn't have that. So I can understand that. I think that there is value in education, period, both experience and through the literary genre. And I don't think it has to be an either or. It's a both for me.
Dr. Harris.
Yeah, I think, I can identify. I went to predominantly white college and universities. But very well taken. I think that part of it is that black people who succeed in America learn to code switch well. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Those who don't learn or refuse to learn just don't do too well. And that's back to that narrative that I was talking about. So there is a value in the type of experiential learning I had where I learned how to live in white America.
Right.
And it works for me for my broader goals in my own personal and career.
And that's what JC was saying.
Right.
Yeah. That's
now,
what she needed.
it sometimes challenges my efforts and desires to see the African American community lifted, because I know what the issue is. When I see young men who refuse to do this and refuse to do that, and I am going to be who I am, I get it. I affirm that. I think we all should be who we are. That's what you're talking about, Dr. Perlow. When you say I don't want the narrative to change, I think that we need a new narrative, because what you were getting at least the way I heard it, is that unity and narrative meshing is usually on the white American terms.
Yeah.
And you're saying I don't want to lose myself, my blackness, in this so-called new narrative you're talking about. But what I'm suggesting is that we have an entirely new narrative that learns to affirm both narratives and learn a new way of living in America that has a variety of, in other words, we shouldn't be the only one that know how to code switch.
Yeah.
Right.
Everybody should be code switching. Nobody should be saying, well, I don't really, an American should be saying, especially in the South, I don't really understand the black community. Well, come on, learn how to code switch. Got some collard greens and cornbread and sit down and do, you know what I'm saying?
And really listen to me when I'm talking.
Yeah. And to hear the narrative and understand why what is the internal, the inner logic within the community.
But Dr. Harris, I could hear someone almost the comment that you made saying, why do I have to do all the changing?
Well, that's what that's what African Americans are saying. We have unity is usually not on the African American terms. Is usually unity is called to we see it in churches. across America, most of the multicultural churches are white pastors and mostly white led. Mm-hmm. And black people are there and they have this experience, which is wonderful. Wonderful. No criticism to that. But one has to wonder, how is it that it's very few or very seldom the other way around?
The other way around.
It's because black people know how to live in a white world.
Yes, we do.
But it's more challenging, and it causes a spiritual and a social discomfort many times for others to fit in our world, because that's just the way society is. Now, if we want to see something change, Dr. Pretlow is saying, let's change, but don't change me in the process.
Mm-hmm. I'm not changing.
There you go.
Let's take a quick break.
That's wonderful.
Guys, let's take a quick break. We'll come right back again. This is Hampton Roads Voices on Hot 91.
Norfolk State University Broadcasting, WNSB, Norfolk, Chesapeake, 91.1 FM, and HD1, Virginia's only full-time urban public radio station, Hot 91.
Is Hampton Roads Voices on Hot 91.
We've been talking about, and we are talking about, creating and defining the African American community, or what does it mean to be black in America today? We've been listening to our callers, and they're calling us at 757-823-9110. 823-9110. As a person of color, do you feel that you have to fit your narrative, your life, your ways into a particular way, culture, society? Give us a call about that. We've had a couple of callers talking about going to a predominantly white school as an African American and trying to create a balance of sort. Again, that number 757-823-9110. So right before we broke for just a moment, Dr. Harris, you were just talking about that code switching.
Code switching.
The code switching again. And even in the church, perhaps there is a person of color who is the lead pastor, or she is the lead pastor, and would they have a congregation of those who don't look like them, or the other way around? We see it all the time.
Right. And I think it's very complex. It's not a simple response.
To that. Definitely.
But I think it is in part a reflection of a society, because religious life is very encoded in culture. Mm-hmm. It's part of, it flows out of culture, it shapes culture. So I think that part of the challenge is whether it's leadership style, whether it's worship style, whether it's preaching style, that all flows out of culture.
Yes.
So one could say, I don't feel spiritually, I don't feel, I don't feel the Spirit is leading me here, right? Mm-hmm. Or I don't feel called to this space. Mm-hmm. But is it that deep, or is it just this cultural thing that is a misfit that you never you're not raised in an environment to force you to fit in a society, in that kind of world. Absolutely. So now you just sanctify the whole feeling and say the Lord is not leading me. When black people can easily do it, because we go switch out. I mean, we grow up learning how to do that, we do. So we can easily, fit into a world that is predominantly white. And we understand that world, and we have to learn. So we never say, well, I don't really understand the white community. We kind of just know, right?
Now, some things I think we have learned to tailor our responses. A few years ago, I was on a plane actually going to Israel and talked to a gentleman. We were having a good time, and he said, "You know what I've always wanted to do? Could I touch your hair?"
Oh, I knew you were going to say that.
And I said, "Yeah, can I touch yours?" I mean, because I was like, why would you want to touch a stranger's hair? What is it about hair that creates this vibe? What difference does it make how I wear my hair?
Mm-hmm. Well, and because it's beautiful, and if you ever had that experience, someone would want to touch your hair.
That had happened to my daughter when she was very little. So I completely understand what you're saying.
So what I'm saying, what I'm suggesting is those in 2019 or 2018 or 2017, when people are saying these things, it signifies the immaturity of diverse development we have in this country. We have many times what appears to be diversity, when actually diversity is not window painting. It's not putting black and white people on a picture on a sign on the side of the road together. That's part of it. And, you know, if you're going to do models and you need to have diversity, but it's deeper than that, right?
Okay,
it's way deeper than that. It's understanding. And that's why listening is so important for all of us, present company included, to learn, to try to understand rather than jump to conclusions, you know, to say, help me understand, you know, how does that, you know, if we spend most of our time, I learned this about leadership. Leadership is really about asking questions and apologizing. If you get in your head, if I'm a leader, I do more asking questions and more apologizing about something I did wrong, and then you'll be fine. But that's how we learn about each other.
So you're saying we shouldn't be afraid to ask the questions,
right?
The uncomfortable questions, the hard questions.
Yes.
Is that what you're saying?
And we shouldn't, in flipping that around, if we're talking black and white, and we feel that white people should learn more about us,
right,
we should actually welcome the questions that could be offensive. It could be, our immediate reaction could be one of offense. Because we feel like they should know. Well, they don't know. No, so don't know. It's like, ask the question, because if you don't ask me, you may not never know. So, and I really want you to know this because my whole community needs you to know this. So.
Absolutely. Yeah. Now, you talked about diversity. Is there a place where African Americans and African Americans need to ask some questions? Or we can't assume that it's just homogeneous. We can't assume that we all understand each other and our experiences are not the same.
They're not.
So even in our own community, is there an aspect here that fits?
Absolutely.
Okay.
My godbrother married a woman who's she's from New York, but her family's from Haiti. And she's always in situations where people assume she's African American because she doesn't even have an accent. She's from New York. But in New York, you can live in Little Haiti, you know, and never really interact with a lot of African Americans. So she's down south now, and, you know, he likes collard greens and cornbread. She's like, what's that? Oh. But she looks black, right? So she has to suck it up and learn to learn to be black, when actually we should probably ask even questions to her, like, help me understand Haitian heritage.
Exactly.
Help me understand our people and our connections down in Haiti, our sisters and brothers in the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. I mean, because what that will do, it can awaken within African Americans a sensitivity to our sisters and brothers in a neighboring country who we might be able to help, but we don't ask the questions because, right.
You know,
very good.
That's very important. Last spring in May, I was invited back to my hometown to an elementary school, 4th graders. And I was like, I don't know what to say to 4th graders. But I was invited because my grandfather had given the property for the elementary school to be built. And that was in days of segregation. It's an integrated school now. But I got to this class of 4th graders and started talking to them and realized that they weren't, the color thing it was an integrated class. I didn't. So one young man said, I have a question. And he said, you say your grandfather gave this property. Did he get a tax refund for this? And I realized that more important to him, and I kept saying, isn't this wonderful, was the fact that here was something that he had learned, and he wasn't actually thinking about color. He was thinking about the practical matter. People when they give things to charities or to schools, they get a tax refund. And we started talking about that. And we also did talk about the racial experience. But these 4th graders were so open to hearing different perspectives. And nobody said, well, that's only the black child there. It was like, they were just, and they all wanted to take a picture with me, and they invited me back in the summer to take a picture with the Smithfield Hog. And I was like, okay, this is really unusual, but okay, we do this. And I think children have the ability, I wish we could keep that.
Absolutely. So how do we start some of these conversations then? Practical things. How do we start them?
I think we start inviting people into our space.
Okay.
And there are people, whites, black, and Hispanics, all diversity, right? We need to start. We are in a society that is going to be a majority minority. Okay. It's going to happen at some point.
It is.
And I know there's a lot of resistance around that right now, but it's going to happen, right? So why don't we learn how to get along? Mm-hmm. And the way what I mean by that is not living in public space as if we're not different. No, let's live in public space understanding the difference. Right? It's the same thing about political civility. Let us learn to appreciate the fact that you believe that way and I believe this way, rather than I'm not going to hang around you because of the way you believe. It's like, no, let's learn. I need to be able to say why a person believes the way they believe, even though I don't believe that way. I need to say why a Hispanic person, why they do what they do. I need to learn some Spanish, right? Because I need to learn, or whites need to learn something about the black community that we don't always have to explain ourselves, but someone who's not like us can say, oh yeah, this is what they do. This is why they do it. We don't do it that way, but they do it that way. That's the way Americans are. That's defining America. We are diverse and we know about each other. Absolutely. And the only way we're going to do that is invite each other, stop all the offense and say, no, ask me some questions. And I'm going to ask you some and we're going to have some emotional moments and I'm going to cry a little bit. You're going to cry a little bit. But at the end of that, you're going to be able to tell somebody why I do what I do and why I think the way I think.
Actually, we had an experience in the classroom that I was teaching politics from an interdisciplinary perspective, and it was an integrated classroom, and we were talking about the Ku Klux Klan. So I invited people to bring sheets, and I said, okay, I want to understand the sheet thing. And we had a fascinating conversation about it because I said, well, I have invited several people that I have met who were former Klans or related. I've invited them to come to my class and talk because I want to understand the perspective. And finally, I met a man on light rail who was alt-right. And I invited him. He gave me a card. I emailed him. I haven't heard from him since. And I said, come and talk. It's a political philosophy class. You have a philosophy. I want to hear it. They want to hear it. Let's talk about it. And at first he said yes, but I haven't seen him.
He's on the light rail here in Norfolk? Oh, that's very interesting.
So I think it takes baby steps.
That's what I think.
It takes some baby steps.
A lot of courage, too. Courage,
and
but baby
it takes
steps.
courage. Because, again, you're not quite sure how someone's going to respond to you.
But unless they kill you.
There's going to be some anger.
But sometimes it's not going to be that bad. There are times when you realize, oh, that was great. Okay. I thought it was going to be worse than what it was. That's why I say courage, because sometimes the courage is to move past your own inhibition, your own, idea about the way people think about you, because sometimes they don't even think the way you think that they think about you.
Right.
Yeah.
Have you ever said, it felt like, I'm mad because I believe that she thinks this about me because she think I said this. I'm like, wait, that's a lot of thinking. What actually happened?
Exactly. Exactly.
So,
So it takes a lot of that kind of thing that's so important. We're going to take a break now, but when we come back from the other side of the break, we'd love to hear from you. 757-823-9110. What about the conversation that perhaps we could have with someone who is a different culture, race, background? Give us a call, 823-9110. This is Hampton Roads Voices on Hot 91.
Is Hampton Roads Voices on Hot 91.
If you're just joining us, welcome everybody. I'm Benita Adams, and this is Hampton Roads Voices. We are talking today about creating and defining the African American community, or simply, what does it mean to be black in America today? We can look at our families, our churches, politics, and culture. In studio, we have Dr. Carol Pretlow, an associate professor here at Norfolk State University in the Political Science Department. Dr. Pretlow, thank you again for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me.
And Dr. Antipas, did I say that right,
That's
Dr.
right.
Harris, a Dean of Urban Renewal Center in Norfolk. Thank you again for being here, Dr. Harris.
It's a delight. Thanks for having me.
So there's so many things that we have touched on, but in our conversation, we were talking about how we need to sometimes have the hard conversations so that different cultures, people, and backgrounds understand each other. But we cannot be ostriches as well, putting our hand in the sand. I think we might have gone through a period where we're using, there's no color. We're just all people. We're just all Americans. But how do we, Dr. Harris, I'll start with you. How do we fight this systematic racism that really is real?
Well, I think part of it is incumbent upon the African American community, how we vote, when we are elected officials, knowing, being woke about what is going on, having conversations, participating in positive transformation and not just simply talking about how bad things are. I think all of those are crucial. When you talk about structural racism and systemic racism, I think we have to do more than react to the way things have been and the way things are now, but to project the direction in which things are going. Part of the poverty in the predominantly black communities was because there was a disenfranchisement when there were factories in those communities, and we worked the factory line, and people got laid off. They didn't know that in the boardroom there were conversations about what's going to happen in the future. So when my grandmother got laid off at Goody's hair care product, she had no idea somebody was somewhere thinking about computers.
Oh, absolutely.
And so she wasn't getting certified. She wasn't getting ready for the future. She was just, how can I draw unemployment for now? And of course, that was the reality. But if we're going to shift things, we need to be in the boardroom. And we don't need to just be in there from a selfish perspective. How can I get mine? And what is in it for me? Yeah. But I am because we are. And how can I use what God has given me to advocate for those who are not here where I am? And that needs to always be on our minds.
I agree totally. And that your comments reminded me of a conversation I had with a colleague a few days ago. We were talking about education, and there was a disagreement because I was telling him about a class I had, and I said, I let them do it as many times as they can to get it right. Why go on to the next thing if they don't know? He said, well, you need to stick to your syllabus and do this. And I said, but this is my future. These are my children. I can't. He said, what you have failed to realize is that your arguments may have worked in the 50s, but now they are not your children. They're grown folks, and they need to take responsibility for themselves. What I don't think he got was this connection with heritage and the feeling that they too will have children. And if I don't help them, then it will pass on, just like any other thing passes on to generations. But somehow we miss that. We begin to think, I got mine, so you got yours to get. And that's not the way education
Now,
goes.
let me push back just a little bit on that and ask the question, is that coddling? Is that giving them opportunities that they wouldn't get in the quote-unquote real world?
Well, it might be to some extent, but I have found that in my discipline, if you don't know how a bill is passed, then how do you know that this person who will represent you in Congress has the qualities to pass this bill? If you don't know how to research what the federal budget, then how do you know the promises that you hear when people are out there promising stuff? Is it realistic or is it not? What are the pros and cons of it? The other side of it is that, to me, people say you teach as you were taught.
Right.
I was taught now I wasn't coddled, but I was taught, Pretlow, you need to do this again. That doesn't make sense. Do it again. And I think, if somebody hadn't done that for me, then where would I be? And I'll end with a final story. I was taking a course in Israeli law. And in law school, if you don't know the answer, you just say, I pass. The professor did that, and then he called on me, and I said, I pass. He said, no, you don't. You're going to answer or you're going to get out. And I said, I'm not going anywhere. And he said, yes, you are. And I said, I paid for this. And I'm paying for this, I'm not going. So he called a security guard and to get me. And I said, oh, my God, this man is serious. And I looked at the faces of my classmates, and they were. So I walked to the back of the room, and when I turned around, I did say something inappropriate. I said, I'll go, but not before I tell you where to go. And he started laughing. And I said, I don't think that's funny. He said, come back. If you're not going to fight for yourself, are you going to fight for anybody else? Now, this was a Jewish professor, and he laughed at me later. He said, I was trying to toughen you up. And some strategies work with some people, some strategies work with others. But what you fail to realize is that the legacy I give you in knowledge, you pass on to somebody else. And I'm not going to let you get to that next level till you master this. So I guess that's the philosophy I live by.
Okay.
I have to.
You know, I think we need to balance challenge with inspiration.
Okay.
We need to challenge folks. At the same time, we need a discernment on when people need to be challenged and when people need to be inspired. So I don't think it's either or, it's both and. And some people are uninspired because their life story doesn't give them the inspiration or the believing that this could happen. So in such a case, there needs to be an additional inspiration, and that may be largely, as we say in the black community, but it's not only the black community. There are people who come from all kinds of stories of disadvantages, and challenges and abuses and broken families and neighborhoods and personalities that could be struggling with some kind of depression or some kind of setback. And inspiration is necessary. Right. On the other hand, some are lazy and may want, a handout rather than a hand up, and you need to challenge them. So I think that we need to be part of help is discernment and trying, again, once you hear stories, understand where people are coming from. It helps with the discernment process on how can I respond to this person in a way that would be helpful. Because sometimes when you're challenging the wrong person, they process it as something very negative, and it turns them off from any pursuit of what they're interested in. Other times, we're challenging people, and they already feel challenged. They need to be inspired. So we need both.
I agree with you.
Well I do
said.
agree.
Yeah,
I do
well
agree.
said. And that's the only reason I just challenged and asked you a little bit about is it coddling, but I completely agree with you.
And a lot of times with my students, like I think I told you about a young man last year, I didn't realize he was homeless. He came to every class, did everything, and then for 2 weeks he was absent. And I was like, this, and nobody seemed to know where he was. So I went over to admissions and tried to find out. When I did find out what was happening to him, I asked him, why didn't you come to me? Why didn't you let me know? Now, his grades never slipped. But I just was concerned that and he told me his story. And I said, why didn't you tell me? He said, I didn't want you to feel sorry for me. Instead of thinking this is a person who can help me, he was looking at it that if I knew, I'd feel sorry for him.
Well
totally
said.
Different.
We're going to go to a break right now, but we'd love to hear from you. 757-823-9110. We're talking about inspiring those in our own community, and we're talking about challenging them as well, and looking at our background and our story and how we put this all together. We're talking about what it means to be black in America on Hot 91.
Is Hampton Roads Voices. Hot 91.
Hi, everybody. I'm Benita Adams. We're talking about what it's like to be black in America. We have a caller on the line. Caller, you're live. What is your name, please, and where are you calling from?
Jafar Day in Norfolk.
Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't get your name.
Jafar Day.
Yes. What is your question or comment, please? From Norfolk.
Okay, I was just sprucing around in a radio station, and I heard you guys talking about a different subject of being, a minority in the country and so forth. And I'm a minority here in the country, and I'm also from a different country living in the United States, migrated here in the 80s and so forth. And, I hear about the systematical, racism and so forth that's set up and everything like that. So I was just calling in to say, yes, I know that it actually is real and so forth.
And have you had an experience in terms of because you're from another country or because it's what is happening here in the U.S.?
Well, it's happening all over the world, actually, because I've been to different countries and in different continents, and it's the same oppression. It might just be different, variety of people, but it's the same systematical thing no matter where you go.
Thank you for calling. That's such an important point. Thank you for that.
Yes. How you doing, Dr. Pretlow? I actually took your class in 2000.
Hello there. How you doing?
I'm doing great.
Wonderful.
Yeah, this is Jafar Ade, the beekeeper from Jamaica. I converted to a
yes, I know.
Yes.
This is wonderful. Come by and see us in the department sometime.
That's good.
Okay,
Thank you so much. I'm going to throw that question to our guest. Just a moment, please. Okay. Dr. Harris, he said he's from another country, and this experience is obviously not unique to the United States, but it's something, of course, that he's experienced here, of course.
Yeah, it's a reality in different parts of the world, where, and I think it has to do with the enemy of progress. However you want to categorize the enemy of progress, because there is no progress where there is no unity. We can talk it from a religious perspective, or we can just talk from just ordinary humanity. Human progress is built on the ability of people to communicate and to affirm our differences. And all differences come with challenges and gifts. And so around the world, the history of humanity has struggled with progress based on our ability to engage people who may have some specific differences. So I think that here in the country, we have had a lot of progress down through the years. There is no denying that America is the greatest country on the earth in many ways. But it's not without challenge to further progress.
Okay.
And I think that if we can overcome this sort of original sin of racism and separation among humanity, we can have even more progress and lead in a very profound way. And part of it is, as our brother, who is now finding himself in an American context wherein there is a high chance, I think he says he's from Jamaica, and I'm assuming he's black from Jamaica. Not all Jamaicans are black. But if you saw him walking down the road, you would assume he's black in America. We just don't have a blink response that, I wonder what country is that black man from? Usually we just assume that they're African American. So then by virtue of that sort of landscape, we tend to, as a people here as an American people, treat ourselves of the rich diversity that comes among people who may have similar skin tone or physical features. And that's wonderful. If we can learn more about Jamaica and learn more about Haiti and learn more about that Africa is not a country, it's a continent with many nations in it. Exactly. And there's even more nations in Africa than what we see on our map because they were colonized. But like in Ghana, there's 76 nations. We just think of one nation. When in Nigeria, there are over 300 nations when we only think of one nation. So tribes were actually nations before they were colonized by the Brits. The richness of diversity that goes very deep among people who may appear at one level to be same is a gift. And so to learn, to hear, to explore, our brother who called in said his folks came through some island. That's wonderful to know.
Yeah,
that's wonderful to know. That's part of the richness that we don't know.
It is.
And so let's learn about that.
That's now, I want to read you something, and then Dr. Pretlow, I'm going to throw it to you at first. And I was doing my prep for the show. I found this quite interesting. It said that it's not easy for Black America to empower itself when all the odds appear to be against our community. And it says many members of the African American community find that sometimes they're afraid to openly participate even in the political and economic progress that might empower our community. So here's my question to you and what we've been saying. Do we lack empowerment? And if so, how do we empower our community?
Wow, that is a very deep question. Now, I think that is also a question that has many levels. Okay. The first source of empowerment comes to me, now this is just my perspective, from me as an individual. And it means that I also share this sense of empowerment. Mm-hmm. Here I am, a 70-plus woman who says, okay, I'm not going to be defined by age, by race, by class, and this is what I can do. Right. Now, this is what I might need help doing. I will give to the community what empowers me, but then I might need help on some others. So we look at it from individual to group to education to jobs to all of these, and then at what level do we become involved? Now, we tend to think of involvement as a group activity only. I belong to this club, this church, but it doesn't have to be that. Mm-hmm. It can be, okay, I got a little bonus at work, I'm going to give to a homeless shelter, or I'm going to devote some time there, or I will work with Girl Scouts to help them do this or that. And so it's now, once you get to an organization, you're bringing the gifts that you have had all along to this organization, and it becomes part of that. And then you give that. And sometimes it's something as simple as education. I shared it with a class of mine was yesterday about learning community organizing from a woman who had a 4th grade education. I was in Isle of Wight County, and what she did, I walked around with her. And one of the gifts she gave me was not only persistence, and that was major, but she showed me how to talk to people and now, she probably didn't think of it as anything big, but it was for me. So that the confidence that she gave me, I shared. And then to this day, her voice keeps coming to me. Absolutely. The morning I woke up and said, law school is too much, I can't do it. And I called her, and she was on her deathbed. Mm-hmm. And she said, you are not. I said, I'm going to flunk out. She said, wait till that happens and then develop a strategy and figure out who you're going to talk to, because they need you as much as you need them. Absolutely. So it can be group, it can be individual, but you figure out what you have to give, and then you give it.
So we empower ourselves, we empower others with what we've gained. Sometimes we can go through an organization. Sometimes we don't have to go.
Starts here.
But it starts inside.
And when a student tells me, oh, that made me feel dumb, I said, no. That can't make you feel dumb. Mm-hmm. Nobody can do that to you. You decide yourself, this is what I need to know, and you don't let other people make you feel anyway. I don't feel inferior. I don't feel dumb. Now, sometimes I feel poor because I need to pay a bill, but
not those other things. Let me get that phone call out, and then Dr. Harris, I want to come to you. 757-823-9110. How do you think the African American community can empower itself? We've heard what Dr. Pretlow has to say. Give us a call, 757-823-9110. Your thoughts on this, empowerment?
Yes, education is empowerment, and I think that we can't emphasize the need for education. It's formal education. It's informal education. Mm-hmm. It's, Dr. John Hayes, Old Testament professor, told me in grad school at Campbell School of Theology. I told him I wanted to be a scholar. He said, Anthropos? He had a wad of tobacco in his mouth. He said, you want to be a scholar? Read everything you can get your hands on. It doesn't even have to be on the subject. Just read it. Learn. You cannot know enough. And then it'll all start coming together in synthesis. And when you're writing all these ideas and experiences. So education, but it's not all about, it's reading, but it's also going to museums. It's the inspiration, the empowerment of going to the African American Museum, visiting people, learning about our history, learning about other people's history, all of it. It's empowering. Other thing is, I think that service is empowerment. Yeah. When I get out there, when I go to Haiti and I go on these humanitarian trips or mission trips, it is empowering for me. Cause it says to me, I have something to give. And that's why everybody who's listening need to know, no matter what your vicissitudes, what your challenges are, what your, situation in life is, you have something.
Right.
And when somebody told me, Antipas, you got something, I said, I do? Really? It makes you straighten your back up. You say, You think I got something to give? You live into your world so much that you don't really know the values that you have and the contribution you can make.
Mm-hmm. But even your failures ultimately become a success. Because I told you about, and my students who are listening, yes, I flunked algebra 7 consecutive times. And I always went to class and I was like, A plus B. No, I'm not getting that. But guess what? It empowered me to feel, okay, I'm sticking in there. Now, I'm not going to drop out. I'm sticking in there. And so that determination makes you, the more determined you are in one thing, it feeds over into something else.
Absolutely. So, and that empowerment, I love that you all saying that, because we were looking at, in terms of the family, the church, politics, culture, and then adding that element of service to that.
Yeah.
Speak, Dr. Harris, to that parent, that grandparent, that family member who needs to get this message, change the narrative or add to the narrative for that young person in their life so that they understand that empowerment is possible.
Yes, that there is always somebody worse off than you. Expose those kids. You may not can take them to New York, but put them on the light rail and take them around Norfolk. There's so much rich heritage right here. The Norfolk State. Take those kids someplace where they can hear it and be exposed to something that's bigger than where they are. And that will inspire them to want to be somewhere great, but also affirm within them what they have.
Yeah. Okay.
They have something. When show them how the situation of the world and let them, because what it does, it makes you realize that you're not always in a gimme position.
Yeah.
And woe is me. But rather I have something that somebody else needs, and that makes me feel empowered to serve.
That's right.
Right? So get involved with serving the homeless and little things around town to inspire them that service is a part of success, because a lot of people gain some sort of material success and they forget about the community because they never connected service with success. But service is inextricably connected to success.
I think it is, and I think you may learn from unexpected places. Like I have walked down Granby Street and talked to homeless guys. One came to my class. He was a Vietnam vet. And I was teaching Vietnam in my international politics class, all the dimensions there. And I asked him if he would come to class. And when he shared his story about Vietnam, and then it gave us some questions about the government at that time, that maybe if he hadn't shared his perspective, they might not have come up with those questions or that way of thinking about things.
Absolutely.
So it all connects.
It really does. And I love that we're saying here that you have something.
Yes.
You have something to give. And I absolutely have always said a person can't want something if they don't know it exists.
Right.
I can't aspire to want this job or be an entrepreneur or get my degree. But in those simple things like taking them to the library, taking them to a university, a HBCU, exposing young people to these things, it allows them to think bigger.
And Hampton, you are the answer to somebody's problem. You are.
I love it.
You are the answer to somebody's problem.
This morning, my students would have thought I was the problem. When they got their papers back.
But when you always feel like you're the problem, you never realize that you are the answer to somebody's problem. And you live into this kind of reality where you just embrace being a problem. You're lackadaisical. Why did I go sarah, whatever happened will happen. Do what I want, smoke what I want, go where I want. Because you don't realize the value that you have and that somebody is waiting on you to answer their problem.
I love that you said that they could be the hope, and we're not always in the gimme. I have nothing position. No. Because that is a mindset.
Yes.
That's a mindset, that the gimme, I have nothing, and I'm waiting for someone, in essence, to rescue me.
Right.
I was reading a book called Abundance Now by Lisa Nichols. She said, you are a great part of your own rescue.
Yeah.
A part of your own rescue. We cannot just wait for someone to rescue us.
Absolutely.
And so I think that is so important.
Because you know what I've discovered? And I always wonder, I've heard people come up with ideas.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I've heard people come up with ideas that they're going to do start a business or start something. And I'm thinking, how is that going to make money? Mm-hmm. And I am so surprised how a little idea could turn into something so great. Mm-hmm. And many times we have ideas that we just shove off because it ain't like such and such. Or not like the other person, or this ain't nothing, this ain't nothing. Oh, my little whatever. And then I heard, people who can sing, oh, my little voice ain't that. Then I heard rappers getting on there singing. And I was like, how in the world did they make so much money singing like that? Because they dared to believe that somebody needed to hear this. And somebody liked it. And so, I mean, just simple, right? It's the little things that sometimes we dismiss that could be a gift. And I think we need to start believing in the little bit we have.
Mm-hmm. Oh, definitely.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And that is critical. So your experience is 757-823-9110. The empowerment, looking at your gift, looking at what you could give. You could be someone's hope. 757-823-9110. This is Hot 91, and we've been talking about living black in America today.
Is Hampton Roads Voices. Hot 91.
Welcome back, everybody. If you're just joining us, we've had a wonderful conversation today. We've been talking about what it means to be black in America from the family perspective, church perspective, politics, and culture. So I want to give our guests a few moments just to kind of tell us some last thoughts, some words of encouragement, some things that we need to hear. Dr. Carol Pretlow, I'm going to start with you.
Well, I think my last thought is what I always share with my students, and it's a saying that came from, I wish I could own it, but it came from Dr. Lyman Beecher Brooks, who was the first president of Norfolk State. Mm-hmm. And he came to my fourth grade class and asked, were we going to college? And I was like, no, not if I can help it. And he went on and he said, remember, it's not where you begin. It's where you finish. Mm. And today when I was giving papers back to students and we were going over that, I said, not where you begin, it's where you finish. Yeah, you might have made a mistake, but you got time. You're going to correct it and you're going to do okay.
I love it. Dr. Harris.
Yeah, that's great. The Urban Renewal Center exists to awaken society to its promised wholeness. And we truly believe there's a hope, there's a future, there's a way forward. And if we don't keep our eyes on hope, we give up and we have nothing to live for. So I want to encourage people to hold on to hope, even in the face of challenges, and believe that no matter what has been done in your life, that you have something to give. Follow me on social media, Dr. Antipas. That's at DRANTIPAS, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, at DRANTIPAS. I'd love to hear from you.
Absolutely. Dr. Pretlow, any contact information?
Well, you can reach me here at Norfolk State University. I'm in the Department of Political Science, 757-823-8999, cpretlow at nsu.edu. And I don't do social media because I'm kind of technologically challenged.
Oh, you said that so well. We appreciate that. Well, I have so appreciated you two being here today. And of course, we appreciate our listeners. Now, don't forget that you can hear the rebroadcast of this show. That is every Sunday, noon to 2. And also, we are here every Friday, 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. You can follow us on social media as well. And that is Hot 91 Online. And, of course, we have a YouTube channel where you can hear these shows over and over again. If you have a show idea, let me know. bkadams@nsu.edu. Thanks so much for being with us today. We'll see you next week on Hampton Roads Voices on Hot 91. The views and opinions expressed on this program are not those of Norfolk State University or WNSB-FM. Thank you for listening.